Come in.
Father, may I talk to you?
Of course. Sit down, my son.
I'm not sure what's going on here, Father, but I see EWTN everywhere I go. I see EWTN on cable. I go to a friend's house, he's got it on satellite. Then I get in my car, I hear it on the radio. I go home, it's on my computer. Online, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, my iPod. Don't misunderstand me. I love EWTN, but it's like it's everywhere. What should I do?
What should you do? You should tell everyone. EWTN is everywhere. It's even on my phone. Isn't it great?
Yeah. Thanks, Father. I will tell everyone. Oh, I feel so much better.
Hello, I'm Doug Keck, Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of EWTN Radio and Television. We are pleased and delighted to unveil the newest of our radio affiliate support services to all of our current and future full-time affiliates. EWTN's Dave Vacheris is about to take you step by step through these new support services. But before Dave joins you, it's important to provide some background about a gentleman who has been involved with the evolution and growth of Catholic radio over the last 2 decades. Now, Dave began working with EWTN back in 1993, shortly after the time our shortwave radio station began operation. It was in 1997 that Mother Angelica made her official pronouncement live on her television program about EWTN's radio services. Listen up, Mother quipped. If you own a radio station or can go out and buy one, and you want to spread the fullness of truth via the radio in your area, EWTN will supply its radio network feed to you via the satellite free of charge. And that's where the birth of EWTN Catholic Radio on AM/FM began. Now, Dave went on to manage one of EWTN's first AM/FM affiliates in Reno, Nevada. That one station grew into what is now Immaculate Heart Radio, our largest affiliate group today, with dozens of stations spreading across 5 different states, including California, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. Dave also appeared as a guest on one of our recent Life on the Rock programs. And during that live show, Dave shared how he got started in Catholic radio.
How did you first get involved with radio?
You know, a lot of the people that have started Catholic radio stations and been involved in one way or another have very dramatic stories about the Lord calling them to that work. I do as well. Actually, I was working in corporate America, and the company that I was working for was going out of business. So I came to visit Mother. I was living in Birmingham. Came to visit Mother Angelica to ask her for her and the sisters to pray for me that I'd find a new job. I had a family to raise. And Mother Angelica at that point said, Dave, why don't you consider coming to work for EWTN? I have a position available in television and one in radio. And obviously when Mother makes a personal invitation, the answer was yes. I said, absolutely. And she said, well, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to go on the television side or this brand new radio project that we have going? I said, well, I'm not sure. Let me pray about it. So I went home, I prayed about it for a few days and came back and met with Mother, and I said, Mother, I'm just not getting any clear indication whether I should go television or radio. Do you have any clear idea? And she said, radio. I said, Mother, how did you know so quickly I should go into radio rather than television? She said, honey, you have the perfect face for radio. Some people's call is more dramatic than others.
And on a more serious note, Dave explained why he believes EWTN Catholic Radio and its continued growth are so important.
It's such a critical message to get across. I mean, to go deeply into that, why is that so critical?
Actually, I'd like to tell a story that I think sums it up best. I've been involved with EWTN for a number of years, and in the early years, Mother Angelica used to do teaching for her employees each Friday. And during one of those teachings, she shared a story with us. She told the story of being at a conference down on the coast. And during a break, she had gone down to the beach and was walking along the water and just losing herself in thought and prayer, got a little too close to the water and got soaked. And she said as the water began to dissipate, she looked on the top of her left hand and she saw one drop of water gleaming on the top of her left hand. And as she was admiring it, as the sun was hitting it, as it was gleaming, she said the Lord spoke to her and said, Angelica, throw that drop of water back into the ocean. Mother, being the obedient person that she is, said she flicked the drop of water back into the ocean. She said the Lord spoke to her a second time and said, Angelica, go find that drop of water. And she said, Lord, you know I want to obey you, but I can't go find that drop of water. She said the Lord spoke to her a third time, more sternly this time, and said, Angelica, go find that drop of water. And she again, pleading with the Lord, said, Lord, I can't find it. It's impossible for me to go in and find that one single drop of water. And she said, he spoke to her again and said, Angelica, you are correct. But as impossible as it would be for you to find that one drop of water in this ocean, it's even more impossible for me to find your sin once confessed in the ocean of my mercy. Why Catholic Radio? Because everyone deserves to know that that's how much God loves us, that we are adopted sons and daughters of a Heavenly Father who loved us so much that He sent His only Son, Jesus Christ, to save us and found a church that will guide us safely home. And everyone deserves to have the opportunity to have that information and then make an informed decision.
Now, with the Cliff Note background out of the way, it's time to begin our training seminar. Dave is going to take you from that all-important first step of meeting with your local bishop right through to how you follow up with each person who fills out a pledge card, ensuring the highest possible fulfillment rate. We are confident that when you follow this proven parish presentation model, you will absolutely have success. It is my pleasure to introduce your parish presentation instructor, Dave Vacheres. Take it away, Dave.
Thanks, Doug. We've got a lot to cover today. I'm going to take you through a process that's proven and has as its number one goal getting people to turn your station on. We need to build your listening audience. You know, EWTN provides the programming free of charge. So you have two major responsibilities in starting this Catholic radio apostolate. One, we need to get a station paid for, and two, we need to get people listening. The primary goal, the primary purpose of this project that I'm going to lay before you today is to get people to turn your station on. To have a station paid for is wonderful, but to have people listening to your station is even more important. You know, I've been involved in a couple of projects, and I know there have been a couple of others around the country that have had one person or maybe a couple of families paying for the station. Though that's wonderful that you have the station paid for, it doesn't necessarily mean you have anyone listening to the station. You know, if I were running a Catholic radio station today, I would gather my employees together every morning, and I would give thanks for the number one blessing we have. And that number one blessing is our need for money. I know that strikes many of you as odd because it's the thing that you worry about the most. But I'd like to explain to you why I think it's your number one blessing. If we need money to pay for our Catholic radio stations, we tend to stretch. We tend to meet with people we wouldn't otherwise meet with. We tend not to close doors that we might otherwise close, saying there's no way this pastor is going to support us, so I'm not going to go and talk to him. I know that this parish will not let us in, so we're not even going to attempt that. Well, you know, when you need money, you'll go and talk to that pastor. When you need money, you'll attempt to go and speak at that parish or meet with this group of people that you think is going to be in opposition to you. So again, I believe the number one blessing you have is this need for money. Let it stretch you. Let it be a blessing to you. Grasp that blessing Give thanks for it. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And this process will show you how you use that blessing to open the door to so many who can begin listening to you. If you don't understand that need of giving thanks for that blessing, I don't know how you're going to understand this process, because I will tell you, it's not the easiest way to raise money. You know, the easiest way to raise money is to be against something, to come forward and say, you know, they're doing this incorrectly or they're doing this wrong, and we're riding in on a white horse to save the day. We have the answers. That's not what EWTN Catholic Radio is about. EWTN Catholic Radio is about being for something, partnering with the local church, partnering with the local parish, sharing in that responsibility given to the successor of Peter in that area, that the successor of the apostles in that area, your local bishop. It's his job to teach. It's his responsibility. And by his graciousness, I believe he will allow us to share in that if we approach him correctly. I know it can be a challenge. You know, Doug talked about the fact that I've been involved with EWTN Catholic Radio for some years, beginning with EWTN's Catholic radio station, shortwave radio station. And many of you are aware, but some of you may not be, that shortwave radio station is located on top of a 2,000-foot high miners mountain. And in order to get there, you take a road that just circles around that mountain, steep curves. And one day while working up there, actually I was driving home from there after a day's work, and I was driving down that mountain through those steep curves. And as I was approaching one of the more treacherous curves, the Lord said to me, "Aren't you going to slow down?" And I thought, one, I had been down that road many times before, and I felt like I was at a pretty safe speed, so I said, no, I feel pretty comfortable with this speed. And as I got closer to the curve, the Lord spoke to me again. He said, "Aren't you going to stop the car and get out and look around to the other side of this curve to make sure this road continues on the other side?" And I thought, again, having driven the road many times before, I was very comfortable knowing that that road continued on the other side. And even if I had never taken that road before, I wouldn't have stopped and gotten out and looked around. I would have trusted that it continued on the other side of the mountain. And then the Lord said something very telling to me. He said, "You trust this road more than you trust me." And it was true. I trusted those who had engineered it. I trusted those who had worked on it, that it would be safe and that it would continue on the other side of the mountain. But I knew what the Lord was saying was every time I came to a curve in my walk with Him, every time things got difficult, I wanted to stop the car and get out and look around to the other side of the issue. I wanted to look into the future to make sure that my God was carrying me on a road that was safe and would take me to where I wanted to go. I stopped, I repented, and I've remembered it ever since. And I want to say to you, I know that there are curves in your journey. I know that it can be difficult. But the Lord is a faithful road builder. He will not leave you or abandon you halfway through this trip. He will bring you safely to your destination. He will complete the good work that He has begun in you. And I do believe that this process can be a part of that. We're going to begin now talking about the first step in this process, the meeting with your local bishop. It's not only the first step by what comes first, it's also the first step in importance. Everything hinges on this. The timing of the meeting has to be right. The participants in that meeting have to be right. And the way we conduct this meeting has to be right. The first part of that, when do you schedule the meeting with your local bishop? The meeting should take place, for those of you who have applied for a CP, when that CP is granted, as soon as that CP is granted, a meeting should be scheduled with your local bishop. For those of you looking to buy an existing station, the meeting should take place as soon as there's some agreement about that purchase. Not at the contract phase, but as soon as you've spoken to the owners of that station and have come to some soft agreement, that's when the meeting should take place. You should be able to walk away from the deal if the bishop has some objections to it. You don't want to walk into a meeting with the bishop and say, Bishop, we have signed a contract to buy a station in your diocese, and now that we've done that, we'd like your blessing and support. That's not how it works. We want to go to him at the earliest stages of the process. Letter of intent possibly, or maybe even before that, before we sign the letter of intent, to get his blessing and support on the project. That is a matter of respect. As we've already pointed out, there is only one successor of the apostles in your area. And this may come as a shock to some of you, but you ain't it. So you need to go to the person who is the successor of the apostles in your area and who has been charged with teaching and preaching in the diocese, and ask him if you can participate in that work of his. So now we know when the meeting takes place, as early as possible in the process. Who attends the meeting? Ewtn is providing a representative of theirs to go to the meeting with a representative of yours, free of charge. The only thing that Ewtn is asking for is that you cover traveling expense. The reason that it's important to have that representative of Ewtn there is because with us, we bring letters from bishops across the country who have written on behalf of Ewtn affiliates in their diocese. These letters are particular. They cover real particular areas that have to be covered in order to be successful. You don't want to go in without this. You also walk into the meeting with a representative of Ewtn with instant credibility. You know, I've met with 40 or so bishops around the country. I've gotten this particular letter that we're talking about each and every time. So when we're in the meeting, the bishop sees these letters from his brother bishops. We do a little research ahead of time to see who they went to school with. Also looking at dioceses that are close geographically so that we can take letters in from those bishops as well, so that there's some familiarity there. Why only 2 people in the meeting with the bishop? Again, a representative from your group, a representative from Ewtn. When you call to make that appointment, and it will be a representative of your group calling to make that appointment, you simply ask the bishop for a 15-minute informal meeting to update him on where you stand with this new Catholic radio project. If there are only 2 of you, then the likelihood that you're meeting just with the bishop is very good. If you choose to take 2 or 3 or 4 people from your group and the representative from Ewtn, so you end up with 3, 4, or 5 people, the likelihood that you're going to meet just with the bishop is not good, because he's going to look at that and say, you know, this group wants me to meet with 4 or 5 of them. Well, I think I need 3 or 4 of us. So now all of a sudden you have the director of development, the director of communications, the vicar general. Who knows who's going to be in that meeting? The more people in the meeting, the more likely it is that you're not going to be able to stay on task, to stay on purpose, just to get that one thing or those 2 things actually that you're asking for. And it's also much more likely that there's going to be a negative voice in the room. You don't want negativity in the room. You want this to stay very positive. Also, going to the issue of those of you who are looking at who knows the bishop best, who is friends with the bishop, who plays golf with the bishop, who goes to the bishop's house. The difficulty there is that if someone is very friendly with the bishop, while they're in the meeting, they're going to be very nervous about how the bishop is feeling. You know, this is a very straightforward approach. I don't like to take no for an answer, but I also explain things very well ahead of time. I wouldn't say it's aggressive, but it's certainly not laid back. So it might make someone who's very friendly with the bishop nervous. But this is the way it has to be handled in order to achieve the goal of the meeting. Make this simple. Don't complicate it. All we're looking for is a 15-minute informal meeting with the bishop, going over with him what our goals are, what we need his participation in, and those two things are very, very easy. We ask him for a letter that he will write to his pastors, asking them to let us in to come in and make a parish presentation during a weekend slate of masses. Again, there are elements of that letter that are absolutely essential, and we provide a template both to you and to the bishop to follow. The second piece that we're looking for is for him to either host or be present at an apostolate kickoff. His presence is absolutely necessary. This is your coming out party. You're letting people know that you're about to start a Catholic radio station in the area. And having him present at that event is something you must have. And many times in a meeting with a bishop, I'll let him know. If he'd like to have a Catholic radio station in the area, we need this letter from him, and we need his presence at the apostolate kickoff. With those two things, we can virtually guarantee success for the project. Without one or the other, you run the risk of not having a successful project. When the bishop understands that, that's when he writes the letter. So again, this meeting with the bishop being the first step, both in time and in importance, needs to follow a particular flow. All of this is laid out for you. We provide everything you need to make this happen. Don't underestimate the importance of following the process that's laid before you. It has a track record of success. Don't ignore it. The Lord will make a way if we pursue this in the right way. The meeting with the bishop is complete. We've accomplished our goals. He's agreed to write the letter, and he's agreed to attend the event. Now we want to focus a little bit on that first step, the letter that the bishop is going to write to his pastors. This letter, I can't overemphasize the importance of its content. I can't overemphasize the importance of it getting done. This is the thing that opens the door to the parish presentations. Without the letter, you still might get into some parishes. And I do want to say at this time, this letter has evolved over time. I've been doing parish presentations for 13 years, meeting with bishops for 13 years. In those early meetings, I would go in and I would meet with the bishop with one goal in mind, that we receive his blessing and support to go forward with the project. This letter didn't even exist in those days. We would ask the bishop to write a letter saying that the project had his blessing and support, just to keep in our file, to distribute to the potential major donors or others, possibly even to pastors. But it wasn't this letter that was written for this particular purpose. When I would receive that letter, I would send it out to pastors, and then I would call them. And I would ask them if I could set up a meeting with them, just to talk to them about the new Catholic radio project. It would take many, many, many calls, even to have a meeting with them. But I would eventually get in to see 60 or 70% of the pastors in a local diocese for a personal meeting. A pretty significant portion of them would end up scheduling a parish presentation, about 50%. So at the end of the project, we'd get into about 50% of the parishes with this letter from the bishop that just stated his blessing and support of the project. It was very time consuming. It was very difficult. Those meetings were somewhat entertaining at times and humiliating at other times. But there still was success. But what's happened in the years since is we've gone from asking from that letter just a blessing and support to one that's particularly written to the pastor and lays out exactly what we're asking for. In your packet, you have the template. The things that are laid out in that letter that make it so successful is the fact that the bishop himself is asking the pastor to schedule a weekend presentation during some period of time, over a 3 or 4 month period. In addition, in the letter, the bishop explains how long the presentation will be and when during the Mass it's to take place, normally after communion. In addition to that, he states that there will be pledge cards and pencils placed in the pews, that no second collection will be taken, but those in attendance will be asked to fill out a pledge card for a gift to be given at a later time. All of these things are contained in the letter from the bishop, so that when the pastor gets these, they see what's going to take place, instead of you having to explain that either in a phone call or in a personal meeting. What happens when you receive this letter and it goes out to the pastors and you begin making your phone calls, everything that comes up from the pastor during that phone call, you refer back to the letter. If the pastor were to say to you, when do you want to do these presentations? You say, well, as it says in the bishop's letter, he'd like to have us do it between June and September, any weekend during those months. How long is this presentation? Well, as the bishop said in his letter, the presentation is scripted and it's 6 minutes in length. Then he might ask you, are you trying to raise money with this visit? You again refer back to the bishop's letter. As the bishop said in his letter, we don't take up a second collection, but we do put pledge cards and pencils in the pews and ask those in attendance to give a gift at a later time. Everything refers back to the bishop's letter. When during the Mass should this take place? Well, as the bishop wrote in his letter, he'd ask that we do these presentations after communion. What happens there when you have this proper letter is you become, in fact, a representative of the bishop. We have a script that you follow, and the script starts this way. Father, this is Dave calling from the Catholic Radio Network. I'm just calling to follow up on the letter that you recently received from the bishop. Even with that statement, I cease representing, in some ways, the local Catholic radio station and begin representing the bishop because I'm calling about the letter that he sent. I want to keep it on that level. I want to refer back as often as I can to that letter and to what the bishop is asking for, not what I'm asking for, not what the local Catholic radio station is asking for, but what the bishop is asking for. That keeps me up here with him. The minute that I go into a conversation that's between myself and the pastor asking for what I want or what the Catholic radio station wants, now I'm operating here on the level of the local Catholic radio station and or on the level of the pastor. Why do I want to give up that ground? I'm operating from here. I want to keep it there. And because of the way he's written the letter, because I'm following the scripts that are being provided to you, I can keep it there with every question being answered, referring back to the bishop's letter. Don't give up that ground. This is a successful way of doing it. You know, I said before, when we would send out that letter to the pastors that stated that the Catholic radio station had the blessing and support of the local ordinary, and then we would go through the personal meetings, we would get, in the end, about a 50% schedule rate. If you get the proper letter from the bishop and you follow the scripts, you'll have a 90% schedule rate. From 50% all the way up to 90% because of the way this has evolved. Don't let that go. Follow the process. This has been done in many, many markets before you with great success. Don't think you have a better solution. I understand it's difficult. We all like to think we have a better way of doing things, but this is a proven model. In many other areas, you would have better answers than we have, but not in this area. This has been done time and time again. Each one was success. Don't recreate the wheel. It's just not necessary. That brings us back to the meeting with the bishop and the importance of getting this letter exactly as it should be. Any variance of the letter can cause you not to be able to schedule a parish. You want to make sure those essential elements are covered. And that's why in the meeting with the bishop, very forward about what needs to be included in that letter. Having the letter, following the process, will guarantee you success in scheduling those parishes. In addition to the letter that the bishop will provide for you, EWTN provides another template called the Project Information Packet. This talks about the history of your local Catholic radio station. It also talks about the history of Catholic radio in general and the philosophy behind Catholic radio. It will also include an alphabetical listing of all of the programs that will be carried on your station. This template that you will fill in is included with this mailing of the bishop's letter. Who mails the packet and the letter from the bishop? Sometimes the bishops really want the letter to go out from the diocesan office. In this case, you'll make enough packets, information packets, and send them to the diocese to be mailed along with the bishop's letter. At other times, the bishop will want you to mail it out. So he'll provide either a template or he'll provide a letter that's addressed to each of his pastors individually, which is what you would prefer. You add that to your information packet and you mail it out to all the pastors. Who gets the letter and the information packet? All the pastors within the potential listening area. All of them receive it. All of them are mailed this information packet and letter from the bishop at the same time. Don't break it up. They all need to go out at once. There's a continuing conversation among our pastors, our priests. If one of them gets it and the other one doesn't, believe me, the other one will know about it. So you need to get them all out at the same time. 3 days after this letter from the bishop and the information packet go in the mail, 3 business days later, you begin making your phone calls. It's absolutely imperative that not a lot of time lapse between the time they receive this in the mail and the time that you begin making those phone calls. This is an important element as well. If those packets and the letters go out and the phone calls aren't made within a reasonable amount of time, which again I believe is 3 days, then this has already left their memory. They get so much mail, even a lot of mail from the diocese and the bishop. So you want it to be fresh on their minds as you begin making those phone calls. Phone calls are made to every single pastor that received the letter and the information packet. Every single day, beginning on that 3rd day. You make these phone calls to every pastor every single business day until they have either scheduled or said no. The key to success in this area, the key to success in having that 90% schedule rate is follow through. You've got to make those phone calls. Pastors are very busy people. I know that it can seem that they're going to get upset with you because you're making so many phone calls, but that's not the way it works. When they call back after you've called them 14 or 15 times, which is about the average, 14 or 15 telephone calls, they're usually very apologetic. And something happens along the process as well. You get to know that bishop's secretary, you get to know the pastor's secretary or the parish secretary very well. They are anticipating your call for the day, might even be dreading your call for the day. But nonetheless, they know that you're going to call. And usually the thing that spurs that pastor on to making the phone call back to you is the parish secretary. So treat them with kid gloves. Be very kind to them, even if they seem to be getting a little agitated with you. Because what will happen eventually is they will bug Father to the point where he has to return your phone call. So be very careful on how you develop that relationship with the parish secretary. You will get the return phone call if you are persistent. If you call every other day or a couple times a week, you won't have nearly the success. You have to call every single business day until they have either scheduled or said no. You'll get very few no's. Again, sometimes you will. There is something else to be considered. Within the letter that the bishop has written for you, he creates a timeline for the parish presentations to be completed in, say a 3 or 4 month period. In some cases, a priest might tell you, well, we're doing a fundraising event for the parish during that time. We have a capital campaign going on. There's an easy answer to that as well. Well, Father, in my conversation with the bishop, we both talked about the fact that some parishes might not be able to do it in this time frame. But he has said that if we need to schedule a couple outside that time frame, that's okay as well. Now, that is something I cover in every bishop's meeting so that you can say that, so that some can be scheduled outside that time frame. So when Father's objection is, I have a capital campaign going on, your simple answer back is, well, that's fine. When can we schedule it afterward? The bishop has given us permission to schedule some later than the time frame that he has laid out in his letter. There's an answer to every objection. These answers are in your scripts. Stick to the script. Be persistent, make the telephone calls, and you will have success in scheduling these parishes. Now to the second thing that we've accomplished through our meeting with the bishop, asking him to attend or host an apostolic kickoff event. This is very important as well. You need to have what's called matching pledges in order to have a successful parish presentation campaign. Creating your matching pledge fund is the goal of this apostolic kickoff event. This event should take place, if at all possible, before you begin your parish presentations. You have a list of people that you're going to invite. Obviously, you're going to put it in the local bulletins, the local Catholic newspaper. You're also going to ask the bishop if he has some people he would like to invite. And in addition to that, EWTN sends a personal invitation to everyone in your listening area who is a donor of ours, inviting them to attend this event. The event can be as large or as small as you determine. You can have a special guest speaker there, someone on the level of Father Mitch Pacua or Raymond Arroyo or whomever you'd like. Or you can just host a dinner yourself, just with the bishop there and your potential donors there. An EWTN representative will be available to be at that event as well. The representative makes the pitch that day for this matching pledge fund. This presentation is about 20 minutes long, is centered completely around how effective matching pledges can be for the success of parish presentations. It goes a little something like this. We're asking you for matching pledges to take into the parish. We can take your $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $25,000 into the local parish and raise another $25,000, not from one person, but from hundreds of people. So the money is multiplied, but not only the money is multiplied, the number of people giving is multiplied as well. That's a very attractive piece for someone who is willing to give a larger amount. Your matching pledge fund has to be set up separately. Money given to the matching pledge fund has to remain in that fund until it is matched at the parish level. It cannot be used to go out and buy this piece of equipment or that piece of equipment and then still be matched at the parish level. It has to be sitting in that matching pledge fund. Now there's one additional piece to that. The matching pledge fund can consist of money given and money promised. It's all centered around your capital campaign. Your capital campaign should consist of the purchase price of the station and any needed upgrades, and 2 to 3 years operating expense. So say for instance your station is $500,000 and you have an operating expense for the next 2 years of $150,000 per year, giving you a total of $800,000. That's your overall capital campaign. Since it includes those first 2 years operating expense, when you go in to create this matching pledge fund, particularly at this apostolate kickoff event, you can ask people to make a promise of what they'll give over that 2-year period and add that to your matching pledge fund. This helps you to create the dollars needed in your matching pledge fund in order to be successful at the parishes. You've got to take a fairly substantial matching pledge into each parish in order to make that campaign in that parish a success. We'll talk about that more as we talk about the actual parish presentation, but this is where you create that matching pledge fund. It's essential. It's essential, one, that the bishop be there. It's essential, two, that the right appeal be made. We do that as EWTN representatives. And it's essential also that you get the word out to as many people as possible. The thing about the attendees at the apostolate kickoff event that's going to be different from those that you speak to at the parishes is the people that attend this event are most likely already going to be fans of EWTN. They're already going to understand that this is an important thing to have in the diocese. And they're all about the new evangelization, bringing many people into the church. These are our target people. That's why we send out our personal invitation and encourage you to announce this event in so many different areas. Your bulletins, again, your diocesan newspaper, and also personally contacting those families in the area that you know value this kind of thing. So this event catapults you into the parishes and helps you to have success on that level by having a successful apostolate kickoff. A few weeks ago, I was invited to speak at one of these affiliate kickoff events in New Jersey. And I'd like to take a moment now and just show you some excerpts from that presentation. I think if you were to contact them, they would let you know this was very successful, taking them to the next level. It can take you there as well. Take a look. We live in interesting times. And I liken it to a time in the Old Scripture, in the Old Testament. And this is a time when Moses has led the people out of Egypt and they've come upon the border of the Promised Land for the first time. And God says to Moses, choose 12 spies, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and have them go out and spy out the land for 40 days and 40 nights, and then bring the people back a report of what they found there. So the 12 spies go up and they spy out the land for 40 days and 40 nights. And then all the people are gathered together to hear the report of these spies. And they tell them that in fact the land does flow with milk and honey, and it is inhabited by the people that God said would be inhabiting the land. But then the spies began to do something that I think is very interesting and appropriate to our age as well. They began to sow a spirit of fear into the people. They began to tell them that the land that they were to inherit was occupied by a people who had fortified their cities, and that there was no way they could overcome the people that were in the land. And the people began to buy this seed of fear that was being planted into them. One of the spies, one of the 12, stood up, Caleb by name, and he said, "Let us go up at once and occupy the land, for we are well able to overcome it. Let us go up at once and occupy the land, for we are well able to overcome it." I told you I've been involved in Catholic radio for a good bit of time now, working in many markets to bring Catholic radio stations. And because of that, my family and I have had to move around quite a bit as we introduce these new stations. So my wife and I have had to look at many houses to live in. I don't ever remember going up to a house in a new market, taking a tour with my wife, coming back out to the car, sitting down and saying, "Honey, I really like that house. Let us go up at once and occupy it." I understood there was a process that it would have to be followed if I wanted to own that home. What Caleb was saying was, the land is already ours. The promise has been made. Let us stand on the promise. He was attempting to sow a spirit of faith in the people, to replace that spirit of fear that had been sown with a spirit of faith, belief in what God had said, the promise that he had made. Joshua, one of the other 12 spies, joined Caleb. But the other 10 spies came back and they continued to sow the spirit of fear, saying there were giants in the land. And brothers and sisters, the people bought the seed of fear rather than the seed of faith. The 10 spies said one thing that I think is most telling and really drives home where we are today. The 10 spies said to the people that when they were in the land and they saw the inhabitants of the land, that they seemed to themselves to be grasshoppers, and so that is how they appeared to them. They saw themselves as grasshoppers, and then that's how everyone else started to see them. Brothers and sisters, I submit to you that some time ago in our country, Christians and Catholics decided that we were grasshoppers, and so that's how people began to see us. And I'd like to say to you now, we are grasshoppers no longer, and it is time for us to occupy the land. It is our inheritance. It is our right. The Catholic Church deserves to have a voice in every single market, deserves to have a Catholic radio station wherever it can be heard. Everyone deserves this opportunity. What we need are some Joshuas and Calebs. If this is going to be a successful venture, we must have our Joshuas and Calebs. The people who bought the spirit of fear wandered the desert for 40 years. God didn't take that small group that believed and say, okay, go ahead and go in. He said, no, go out and wander the desert for 40 years until a generation of faith can be raised up. That's what we need now. We're either going to wander around for another 40 years, or Joshua's and Caleb's are going to be raised up, and a generation of faith will be raised up through them. I am asking you, on behalf of Domestic Church Media, to become its Joshua's and Caleb's so that it can reach the masses. But it can't happen unless you have those beginnings. those Joshuas and Calebs. I want to take just a moment and go backward and re-emphasize something that we've already talked about. But I want to do this to show how important it is. These scripts that we're providing to you to make these pastor phone calls are essential. Don't go off on your own. These contain answers to common objections, proven answers that will help you to schedule the parish. Be persistent, make your phone calls. This is the beginning of the relationship with the pastor. From there, after you have scheduled your presentation at the parish, it's also very important to continue that communication. Can you imagine how many calls a pastor is taking a day? Even how many things are being scheduled at the parish on an ongoing basis. So after we've scheduled this weekend at the parish, we send out a letter to the pastor, re-emphasizing all the points, thanking them for the opportunity to come to the parish. The dates are restated in the letter, when we will be there. In addition to that, all of the elements of the presentation are restated in the letter. The fact that the presentation will be 6 minutes long, that we'll be putting pledge cards and pencils in the pews, but no second collection will be taken. When the presentation itself will take place after communion. All these things have been stated in the letter. They've been stated in the letter that the bishop sent. They've been stated and clarified during the conversation when we schedule the presentation, and now restated again in the letter that we're sending to the pastor. So that when your presenter shows up at the parish, and Father wants to talk about not allowing pledge cards and pencils in the pews, you can point back to all of these things. It shouldn't even happen because these things have been talked about so consistently. It shouldn't be lost in all the other phone calls that Father receives and all the other things that are scheduled. You've stated them over the phone, now you have them in writing. It's important that they be in writing. Do not disregard the need for sending this follow-up letter. It is very important, and it's also very important that it contain all of these elements. Again, a template is provided for you. All you do is fill in the blanks, making sure that everything is covered, no questions are left, and so that your presenter is not left in an uncomfortable position at the time that they show up at the parish, trying to gain ground on something that has already been covered. This is necessary. Don't leave it out. We'll also include a template for a pre-talk bulletin announcement. As you look at this, you will see it's very simple. And I would not suggest that this pre-talk bulletin announcement go out automatically. It's not necessary to make an announcement the weekend before that you're going to be coming the next weekend. But some pastors and some parishes ask for a bulletin announcement. In that case, send them this one. As you can see, it simply states that a representative of your radio station will be speaking at all the masses the following weekend about the new Catholic Radio project. It doesn't go into detail. It's not necessary. The presentation itself says all that needs to be said. You can't say much with this bulletin announcement. So again, don't make it an automatic thing, but it is available to you for those pastors and those parishes that request it. We've followed the process, and now that most important time has arrived. We're at the parish. This cannot be overstated how important this time is, obviously. This is our opportunity to be before the people, to get them engaged, to let them partner with us in this new Catholic Radio project. What you're going to say is very important. The presentation is carefully weighed, each word. But almost as important is how you set up the parish. How many people are going to be there? What are the materials you need? That's what we're going to discuss now. You want to make sure, obviously, your presenter is there at least 45 minutes before the first Mass on Saturday evening, and at least 30 minutes before each Mass on Sunday. The reason for that will be obvious when we talk about the setup. On Saturday night, you want to be there in time to greet the pastor, have a short conversation with him. The material that you'll need a lot of pledge cards, more pledge cards than you think you need. A lot of pencils, golf pencils, the short golf pencils, more of those than you think you could ever use. And then a box for each and every exit, a box that will sit nicely on a folding chair. Not a small box, but a box large enough to cover the folding chair. That folding chair needs to be placed at each exit at a place that's easily reachable by those who are going by. Don't complicate this part of the presentation. You don't want to make anything inconvenient for those who are trying to help you. The placement of the pledge cards and the pencils is essential, and it cannot be changed. There is one steadfast rule for the placement of pledge cards and pencils. Pledge cards are placed at one end of the pew, one end only, the end closest the middle of the church. Let me say it again with emphasis. Pledge cards are placed on only one end of the pew, the end closest the middle of the church, with pencils neatly stacked upon them. I get so many arguments over this. So many people object to this. Let me explain the philosophy behind this. Many people want to spread pledge cards out. This doesn't work. Secondly, the other thing that people tell me most often is they want to put pledge cards on both ends of the pew. Let me tell you why it's important to put them only on one end of the pew. As you're talking, and you're going to hear the presentation in just a few minutes, you're instructing people in the parish to pass those pledge cards down. If they're located only on one end of the pew, then you're only asking one person in that pew to begin the process. If they're located on both ends of the pew, pledge cards on both ends, then you're expecting two people in one pew to do what you're asking them to do. And I can tell you, you've basically guaranteed that neither one of them are going to do it. You have to put one person in charge. You have to make sure that that one person follows what you're asking them to do. And then the process flows. So pledge cards are placed only on one end of the pew with the pencils stacked neatly upon them. Pencils, golf pencils, short golf pencils stacked neatly on top of the pledge cards. Don't just scatter them. Don't place them in a way that it makes it look like this isn't important. Place them neatly upon the pledge cards so the people who are looking there as they enter the pew will see that someone took the time to put pledge cards and pencils all facing neatly in the same direction. So that tells them that what's there is important. It was important to the person who placed it there. It becomes important to the person who sees them there. If you don't take the time to do it neatly, they're going to see it wasn't important to you, so it's certainly not important to them. The setup is absolutely vital. If you spread those pledge cards out, it won't work the same way. If you put them on both ends of the pew, it won't work the same way. One end of the pew, the end closest the middle of the church. Follow this process. The person seated at the end of the pew closest the middle of the church picks up both the pledge cards and the pencils. He or she takes one for themselves and then passes the rest down. What happens at the end of that process? Every single person in the church is holding a pledge card and a pencil. And just as importantly, every single person in the church has seen their neighbor do the same thing. We as Catholics need permission. We want to see everybody else doing it before we do it. This ensures not only that they'll have a pledge card, but that they'll see that their neighbor does as well. It gives them permission to participate. Don't fall down on this part of the process. If you make a perfect presentation, you've memorized the whole script, and you deliver it with passion and conviction, but you haven't set the church up properly, you are going to cost yourself some pledge cards. Again, going back to the main goal, keeping the main thing in this project. The number one goal, having someone listen to your station. That's the only reason I want them to fill out a pledge card, because I know in filling out a pledge card, they are partnering with you, and they'll go out and turn the station on. They'll listen. And we know that the Word of God says when the Word goes out, it doesn't return void, but accomplishes that for which it was sent. If you can be successful in that part of your ministry, if you can use your energy to get people to turn the station on, you are guaranteed that lives will be changed. We know that it's true because the Word of God says it's true. That's our goal, to get them to turn the station on. I know, because I've been there, that many of you are thinking about that $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 donor. I have to confess this about myself. I'm thinking about that young lady who's going to make the $5 pledge because you've done everything the way you were supposed to do it. And by making that $5 pledge and partnering with you, it drives her to turn the station on. And her life is changed forever. She is convicted. She grows in her relationship with the Lord. That's why I travel. That's why I do these things, for that person. I couldn't do it for money, but I can do it for that because it's about changed lives. That's why this process is so important. I don't know how much money it would cost you if you don't follow everything exactly, but I know that it will cost you the number of pledge cards you get. And within those might be the pledge card you should have gotten from that young lady. And I just don't think that's worth it. Follow the process. Get the ultimate amount of pledge cards. Touch the lives that you're supposed to touch. Get those people who are called to fill out those pledge cards to fill them out because you've been diligent in the way you've gone about this process. And the Lord will take care of the rest. Again, those boxes located at each exit, very accessible. That's important as well. I know years ago I was working with someone and they set up the parish and he brought the boxes that he was going to use for the weekend. And it had a top. He had placed a top on it and he had cut a hole in the top of it, like it was a collection for Valentine's Day. If you do something like that, and his reason for it I understood. He thought people would want their pledge card to be private. They wouldn't want other people to see it. I get it. But you can't create a line at the door of people waiting to put their pledge cards in. It's just not going to work. You've got to make it very open, very easy for them to follow through with what you're asking them to do. The last thing that you'll need as far as material goes is something to hand the people as they walk out the door. A program guide, a trifold brochure, whatever the case may be. We do include a template, but I do encourage you to provide your program guide as one of the elements in this template. Every person that walks out the door needs to get your program guide. And I would say this, it's more important that those who don't give you a pledge card get this program guide than those who do give you a pledge card. You're going to have a continuing conversation, a continuing relationship with those who have given you a pledge card. For those who don't give you a pledge card, this might be your last point of contact. So make sure that they get this piece of information. So you need your presenter there that weekend. You also need some volunteers to man the doors and to help reset, first to set up on Saturday, and then to reset between Sunday Masses. Sometimes it's very close, but in between each Mass, you have to reset everything as it was. All the pledge cards and pencils pushed back to the end of the pew, the end closest to the middle of the church. Many people will want to help you with this. A lot of people want to participate in this project. Obviously, you're going to recruit a lot of people to come forward and make presentations. Not all of them are going to be qualified to do the presentations. Help them, ask them to help you in the setup of the parishes and to help your presenters so that everything is in place when it needs to be in place so that we can have the best impact possible. The parish is properly set up. Our pledge cards and pencils are placed correctly. We've said hello to Father, worked out all the details. We know where we're speaking from. And now it's time to make our presentation. First, who should make the presentation? Only those who are well-trained and willing to stick to the script. You're going to have to discern that. Obviously, people are going to come forward who want to make the presentation, who need to be used in other areas, not as presenters. Be careful about this process. Be careful in your discernment of this. The presentation itself, the script, is important. You've got to stick to the script. It's proven. It's worked over and over again in all parts of this country with basically the same result. 40% participation rate among those who are present at Mass for about a $90 average gift. This needs to be done properly. Don't let someone go up and change the script. Again, going back to the idea that we all think we can do something better. This is proven. Don't mess with it. It is the one rule we have. If you're going to follow this process, then you have to stick to the script. It cannot be changed to suit yourself. It just can't. If you're going to change it, then we just can't allow you to use it. It sounds tough, but that's the way it is. I've seen it happen so many times over the years. People have taken elements of this parish presentation, built their own talk around it, and they don't have the same results. And then they come back later and say, parish presentations don't work. Well, yeah, they do. You didn't work parish presentations. You've got to stick to what is there. One key rule: no person can give the parish presentation in their own parish. No one can make the presentation at their own parish. The reason for this is simple. All of us have reputations in our own parishes. For good or for ill, we don't want your reputation to be the reputation of the station. The station needs to create its own reputation. It doesn't need to stand on yours. And this is going to be difficult for some of you to hear, but in every parish, we have groups of people who like us and groups of people who don't like us. That means we've eliminated a whole group of people, the ones who don't like us, just because we're known in the parish. It's not worth the trade-off. I will say this. I don't know that it would affect the cash. I don't know that it would affect how much you can collect, because those who like you might even give more than they would give to someone they don't know. But again, it's not about the dollars. It's about getting the people to fill out the pledge card and listen to the station. We don't want to write off a whole group of people just because of the reputation of the one who's speaking. So that's a steadfast rule. No one speaks at their own parish. When does the presentation take place? Again, this goes back to the bishop's letter. We will normally ask him to include that the presentation is to take place after communion. The presenter should be up front and close to where they're going to be speaking after communion. Don't make a big ruckus when you're introduced walking the length of the church to get to the podium. It's just not necessary. Be close. I'd like to go over the actual presentation with you now from start to finish, and then we'll go through it paragraph by paragraph. The station that I'll be using is the one that I've spoken at last, as well as the parish that I spoke at last. So let's begin. Father has introduced me, and now, hi, my name is Dave Vacherus, and I'm here with the nonprofit organization Immaculate Heart Radio, which owns and operates your brand new Catholic radio station, KIHM, here in Phoenix, Arizona. If you've not had an opportunity to listen to your new Catholic radio station located at 1310 on your AM dial, I do encourage you to do so. I think that you will be uplifted by what you hear. You know, Catholic radio is somewhat of an anomaly in our country. There are 15,000 AM and FM radio stations across the United States of America. 10% of these, or over 1,500, are Protestant radio stations. Including your new Catholic radio station, 1310 AM, there are a total of about 160 Catholic radio stations in our country. Again, those numbers, over 1,500 Protestant stations, yet only about 160 Catholic radio stations in our entire country. To bring that a little closer to home, here in the Valley, there are 9 different radio stations carrying a Protestant format. Catholic Radio 1310 AM becomes the first and only Catholic radio station in this area. Our Protestant brothers and sisters have shown us that this is an effective tool for evangelization, and now we are acquiring stations as well. Catholic Radio 1310 AM has the blessing and support of the diocese and of our bishop, but we are not owned or operated by the diocese. Translation, they think it's a great idea, but we need to raise the money to pay for it. The total cost associated with the startup of the station, including purchase and operating expense, is $2 million. We've created an organization called the Catholic Radio Army of Angels in order to help us realize this goal. We see in the Old and New Testaments angels taking messages from God and delivering them to the people of God. In particular, we see the angels appearing to the shepherds after the birth of the Christ child, announcing their news of great joy, a joy to be shared by all the people, a message of salvation. We have that same opportunity in our day. Catholic Radio 1310 AM reaches well over 3.5 million people with the good news of Jesus Christ and the teachings of the church that he himself founded on the Apostle Peter. I invite you to participate with me, sharing in the sacred ministry of the angels, sharing this news of great joy. I'd ask those seated closest to the end of the pew, the end closest to the middle of the church, to please locate the stack of white pledge cards that are there, along with the pencils. Again, you're going to find these only on one end of the pew. It's the end closest to the middle of the church. If you're seated closest to that end, I'd ask that you locate both the white pledge cards and the pencils. I'd like to go over with you now how you can become an angel in the Catholic Radio Army of Angels. Again, I do apologize to those of you having to scoot down to get these, but they are located just on that one end of the pew, the end closest to the middle of the church. The first way that you can become an angel in the Catholic Radio Army of Angels is listed under name and address, and that is by making a monthly pledge of any amount listed on the card, simply by checking the box next to the amount that you would like to give. Or if the amount that you would like to give is not listed on the card, simply write that dollar amount in the other column, then check the box below that says monthly pledge. You can also make a one-time pledge by following those same directions, but checking the box below that says one-time pledge. We have a very special opportunity this weekend here at Christ the King. A group of very generous individuals have come forward and said that they would match the entire pledge amount of all the people gathered at Mass here at Christ the King for this weekend only, up to $25,000. That means for every dollar you pledge, we get $2. So I'd ask that you please keep that in mind as you fill out your pledge cards this morning. And one thing I would point out is if you make a monthly pledge, we are able to multiply that monthly dollar amount times 12 months in order to arrive at the dollars to be matched. So in other words, if you give $10 a month times 12 months, that's $120, plus $120 from the matching pledge. That becomes a $240 gift for just $10 a month. So I'd ask that you please consider making a monthly pledge in any amount. Your pledges are tax deductible. We're a nonprofit organization, and I'm only asking for pledges today. I'm not asking for cash or checks. What I'd ask you to do is simply fill out the card with your information, indicate the gift that you'd like to give, and whether it's a one-time pledge or a monthly pledge. There are boxes located at each of the exits. If you just drop your card into one of those boxes as you leave Mass today, then we will remind you by mail in the next couple of weeks of the pledge that you've made and ask you to fulfill it in the next 30 to 60 days. Please do not take your pledge cards home with you. The only way we can take advantage of this very generous matching pledge is if you leave your pledge cards with us today. I'd like to leave you with one last thought, and that is, the only thing you get to take to heaven with you are the things you give away while you're on this earth. And as the message from the angels to the shepherds resounds to our day, affecting, changing, and converting lives for the Lord Jesus Christ, even in our generation. So the pledge you make today will not only affect our generation, but generations to come, as the good news of Jesus Christ continues to be proclaimed on the Catholic airwaves in this area long past our lifetimes. Thank you very much for your kind attention and patience, and I'll be in the back if you have any questions. That's it. That's the presentation. You know, I know you're probably listening to it saying, well, what's so special about that? I can't really say. I don't know. It's very simple in its approach. Doesn't give a lot of information, which is astonishing to most. You know, it doesn't say what your programming is, for instance. I hear that a lot. Why don't you talk about programming? It's not part of it. You know how many questions we get about that at the end of the presentation? Nearly none. Doesn't talk about the makeup of your board, what your vision is. Just doesn't include those things. Those are things that we think people are going to ask, but they don't. It's simple. It leaves it wide open. It just talks about the need for Catholic radio. That's it. Let them determine the rest. They're painting a picture in their minds of what this Catholic radio station is or what it's going to be. Let them paint away. If you start talking about the particulars, you're going to turn some of the people off. If you talk about the fact that it's a talk station rather than a music station, well, those who want a music station are now all of a sudden not going to fill out pledge cards. And they're going to talk to you after Mass and say, don't you know the importance of music? You know, we need some good music. Don't bring it up. Why add something that's just going to cause a certain number of people to object? Bring all of them in, knowing that what you are going to provide to them is the very best thing they could have. They may not have chosen the format that's going to be in place, but they'll agree with it once they hear it. We don't want to give too much information. Information only leads to division. Let them come forward, participate in it, partner with you, and then listen and be fans of it because they turned it on. That's all. I'm going to go through the presentation paragraph by paragraph, beginning with the first, introduction. Simply stating your name, your organization, and the fact that it's a nonprofit organization, where it can be found on the dial if you're already on the air, or giving them some timeline of when the station will be on the air if it's an up-and-coming station, and encouraging them to listen. Very simple. The second paragraph is a very important part of the talk, and it's repeated back to me quite often after Mass, the numbers that we talk about, and that is the anomaly. Catholic radio is somewhat of an anomaly. 15,000 AM and FM stations, 1,500 Protestant stations, about 160 Catholic radio stations. Those numbers are repeated to me over and over again after Mass. Now you have to know, when I first began giving this talk in 1997, those numbers were 1,500 Protestant stations and only 5 Catholic radio stations. So those numbers have shifted dramatically and will continue to grow. So it doesn't have the same impact it used to have. 1,500 versus 160, it's still pretty dramatic, but it's not as dramatic as it used to be. So another element that I've added to that is how many stations in the local market carry a Protestant format, with this being the first and only Catholic radio station as a comparison. It brings it a little closer to home. And so now those comments are the ones I'm starting to hear, more on the line of what's happening in the local area rather than just the national numbers. Right after that, we go into the fact that the station has the blessing and support of the diocese and of the local ordinary. But we are not owned or operated by the diocese. Both of those things are equally important. The people need to know that you're operating with the blessing and support of the local ordinary, but they need to know that you're not owned or operated by the diocese. They're thinking, to this point, they're probably thinking you're getting money from the diocese through the communications campaign or through some other avenue. But in this way, you're making it clear to them that you are not being supported by the diocese from a financial standpoint, but you do have the support and blessing of the diocese. And with a little bit of humor added in with the translation, they think it's a great idea, but we need to raise the money to pay for it. Again, just emphasizing that responsibility is ours. Now we introduce the actual capital campaign. How much is this going to cost? As we talked about in a previous segment, that capital campaign should consist of what your purchase price is and the first 2 or 3 years operating expense. So whatever that number is, that's inserted here. In this case, it's $2 million. So we're talking about a $2 million campaign. Now on to how are we going to raise that money? And the introduction of this new group that we're asking them to join, the Catholic Radio Army of Angels. This explanation of angels is so significant in this presentation because it continues on through the rest of the presentation, letting them know that the ministry of angels, one of the jobs of an angel, is to bring the Word of God to the people of God. That's what Catholic Radio does. It shares the Word. It shares the truth. It invites and encourages. And in that way, sharing this Word is a participation in the ministry of the angels. You're inviting people to be a part of that group, to in essence be an angel. It helps them to feel like they belong to something special. So it's important that that be there. And then right after that, we talk about how many people are going to be affected by this radio station. How many people can hear the station potentially? Again, in this market, it's 3.5 million. This number should be determined by people who can actually hear the station, not on the outlying areas, but clearly hear your radio station. What is that number? Put that number in there. Not the number of Catholics, not the actual number of people tuning in, but the number of people who live in that area. That should be the number inserted there. So now, after we've let them know what the name of the organization is that they can be a part of, Catholic Radio Army of Angels, how many people are being affected, we've made the invitation for them to be an angel. Now comes the crucial moment. We're going to ask them to pass down those pledge cards. I hope you noticed, in my presentation, I asked them 3 times. Now, I'm not in a church right now. I'm in a studio. So the timing on my asking them to pass out on what you just watched, those pledge cards, versus what I might do in a parish might be a little slower. Because what I'm doing is I'm looking at the people in the church. I'm actually looking at the first person sitting closest to the end of the pew, the end closest to the middle of the church. I want to see if that person is doing what I'm asking them to do. And if they're not, then I'm going to look at them. And I'm going to keep my eye on them to make sure they do it. And I'll ask again and again if I have to make sure that those pledge cards and pencils are being passed out. I normally focus on one person who's resisting what I'm asking them to do. I look right at them and I wait until they pass down the pledge cards and the pencils. Makes them a little nervous at first, but then they get it. Then I'm not going on. I'm not going forward with what I'm talking about until they do what I'm asking them to do. I do it respectfully. I'm not looking at them with an evil eye or anything like that, but I make sure they understand I'm looking right at them, waiting for them. If a person doesn't have a pledge card and a pencil in their hand, how are they going to follow the rest of what you're asking them to do? It's essential. So wait, be patient, let them pass the pledge cards and the pencils out throughout the entire church before you go on to the next step of going over the card. I get a lot of people come up to me after Mass, after a presentation, and they'll say, "Thank you for telling us how to help you." So many people come into the parish and give us great information about why they should be helped, why they're worthy of our support, but they don't tell us exactly how to do it. This talk goes over and over and over again, not only our need for help, but exactly how we're asking you to help us, how to fill out the pledge card, what boxes to mark. There are no questions left at the end of the presentation as to what we want you to do. Once these pledge cards have been handed out, everyone has them in their hands. We've gone over the particulars for how to fill out the pledge card. Now we introduce the matching pledge. There are people in the church already who have decided to help you because they believe in what you're doing. The matching pledge element raises the percentage of participation from 15% to 40%. Again, let me say that. If you don't have a matching pledge, you'll have about a 15% participation rate. 15% of the families present will fill out a pledge card. With a matching pledge, that rate of participation jumps all the way up to 40%. So you can see what an important element the matching pledge fund is. It creates that idea in the people's minds, not only that they're going to help you, but that they're going to help you right now. And that's important. By far, the majority of those who fill out pledge cards give a one-time only gift, which is very much appreciated. If we can encourage people to give a monthly pledge, that means they become real ongoing partners with us. They're giving us something each month. So that's why we state within the presentation what happens if you give a monthly pledge. All monthly pledges are multiplied by 12 months, taking a $10 gift to $120, obviously turning that into $240 with the matching pledge. And many times when you go through the pledge cards after everything is said and done, you'll see many people have marked off a one-time pledge of $25 or $35 and marked that $10 a month gift. You want to see that. Those are your real partners in your apostolate. So you want to do anything you can to encourage that, and that does drive your monthly pledges way up just by giving that explanation. After that explanation is given, we're going right back to restate the fact that pledges are tax deductible, letting them know again that we're a nonprofit organization and they will benefit from that tax deduction. It's important to all of us. It's there for a reason. Many of us think in that way, that when we give, we do want to be able to include that in our taxes. So we restate that. After that, we again go over a very important part of the talk. And that is, we're not asking for cash or checks today. We don't want what's in your wallet. We would like for you to consider giving us something from your checkbook or your debit card or whatever the case may be. So we're saying, we're not asking for cash or checks today. We're just asking for pledge cards. Please give us the filled out pledge cards, drop them in the boxes on your way out, and we will remind you by mail in the next couple of weeks of the pledge that you've made and ask you to fulfill it in the next 30 to 60 days. We're giving them time. They're not only thinking about what might be in their checkbook, but what might be in their checkbook in a month, or what might be in their checkbook 2 weeks from now. So you might get a more generous pledge in letting them know that. Again, we're letting them know. No cash, no checks, your pledge cards. Please don't take your pledge cards home with you. The only way we're going to be able to take advantage of the matching pledge, going back to that matching pledge, is if you leave your pledge cards with us today. So many people take things like these pledge cards home with the intention of filling them out and mailing them back, but they never come back. And the only way to get someone to fill out a pledge card and leave it with you is this matching pledge, giving them a reason to leave it with you today. And it is the only way you're ever going to see that pledge fulfilled. They need to give it to you that day and follow the process. This response that they're having is truly an emotional response. And so we need to get them to act on that emotional response immediately. And then all the steps that come after this continue to build on that emotional response. So please don't take your pledge cards home with you. Has that tremendous effect. Then the thing that's most repeated back to me is the end of this presentation. I'd like to leave you with one last thought. The only thing you get to take to heaven with you are the things you give away while you're on this earth. You know, the most beautiful thing about that is it's true. We only get to keep what we give away. And I know that what I see out in the church as I'm saying this, and it becomes very quiet, much more quiet than the rest of the presentation. The church becomes very quiet as you're making this statement. And I think what's going on is people are calculating. Well, if the only thing I get to keep is what I give away, I'm not keeping much. So that's when you see people pick up the pencil and begin writing. That's our number one response time. That's when people respond after that statement is made. And I think it's a good thing because they are reacting to an absolute truth. And hopefully it will not only impact them in filling out this pledge card, hopefully it will impact their decisions for giving in the future as well. That's it. That's the presentation. It's simple. It's straightforward. If you'll follow it from start to finish, you will have the response that we've talked about. I thank you for being willing to be humble and come under this and not interject your own thoughts or ideas into it. I believe the Lord will reward you for that, and you will see great success in your parish presentations. You've completed the difficult task of meeting with the bishop, sending out the letters, scheduling the parishes, making the parish presentations themselves after properly setting up the parish. And now you come to what I dare say is the most important part of this process, the follow-up. You've collected these cards, but what you do now will absolutely affect the outcome. Phone calls must be made to everyone who's filled out a pledge card in the first or second day. So on Monday or Tuesday, you have to call everyone who's filled out a pledge card. The script is provided to you, but I'll give it to you in its simple form. Hi, this is Dave Vacherus calling from the Catholic Radio Network. I'd like to thank you for the pledge that you made this past weekend at St. Mark's and let you know that your reminder letter will be going out in the mail in the next couple of days, and I'd like to thank you in advance for your generosity. It's a very simple script. Most of the phone calls that are made are left on voicemails, so it doesn't take a good bit of time. As you can tell, it's about a 20-second script. You can get through quite a few, but you've got to make sure you have people in place to make those phone calls. If those phone calls are not made on Monday and Tuesday following the parish presentation, your fulfillment rate goes from 80 to 85% down to about 50%. So you can see the importance of following through on this step. On Wednesday of that week, so the phone calls are made Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday of that week, we send out a bulletin announcement to the parish where we've made the presentation the weekend before, filling in the numbers, how many families pledged and what the total dollar amount was, and thanking them for their generosity. Also during that week, before the end of the week, every single person who has filled out a pledge card has to have their reminder in the mail. So you have phone calls on Monday and Tuesday, you have the bulletin announcement going out on Wednesday, and all pledge reminders in the mail by the end of the week. Let me explain why this process is so important. You've made a 6-minute presentation at their parish. The presentation itself doesn't involve a lot of information. What has happened is they have committed on an emotional response. So now you're trying to carry that emotional response over until the time that they fulfill their pledge. So the presentation happens during the weekend, the phone call reminds them of that emotional response, the bulletin announcement that they'll see at Mass the next Sunday again is a reminder of that emotional response, and the reminder that they get in the mail, once again, a reminder of that emotional response and giving them an ability to fulfill that pledge while they're still in that place, while that emotional response is fresh in their minds. Any of these steps, if you skip any of these steps, you will cut your fulfillment rate nearly in half. Make sure you have people in place to make these phone calls, staff and or volunteers, and that you have people in place to send out these reminders. You don't want to fall down on this part of the process, losing so much of what you've gained through your hard work leading up to this. All of this working together is for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to get someone to turn the station on. That's it. Your full responsibility as people running an EWTN Catholic radio affiliate. You should be focused and centered on getting people to turn the station on. That's what this parish presentation project is all about. It's all geared toward getting someone to turn the station on. I want to go back for just a second to the actual presentation itself. The one thing you cannot do out of curiosity or for any other reason is count cards or look at cards in any way at the parish. Let the people leave them in the boxes, put them in a stack, and remove them after each Mass, but do not count them. Don't count them to see how many, don't count them to see how much has been pledged. And there's one other really good reason for this. You're going into the parish with a designated matching pledge dollar amount. If you're going into St. Mark's and you have a $10,000 matching pledge challenge, and St. Mark's has 5 Masses, and you've been counting the cards as you go, and after 3 Masses, you've exceeded that $10,000, how can you honestly and sincerely go out before the people and tell them that there's a matching pledge for the weekend and every dollar that they pledge will be matched up to that amount if you know that amount has already been exceeded? Don't count the cards. Wait until the weekend is complete before you do any calculating of those cards, and never, ever, ever let anyone see you looking at a card in a parish. It's not a good thing to do, because then people get the sense that all you're there to do is collect money, and that is not the purpose at all. Again, knowing the major thing behind parish presentations is to get someone to listen to the station. The way we can have such great confidence in that the beginning of our work is to get someone to listen to the station, and the end of our work is to get someone to listen to the station, is because we stand on the Scripture that tells us that when the Word of God goes out, it doesn't return void, but accomplishes all that it was sent to do. We know that the Word is powerful in its effect. So we know if we can just use the gifts that we've been given, if we can use the process that's been proven over and over and over again, just to get someone to turn on the station, God takes it from there. We can trust that He will be faithful to His Word, and He will bring to completion the good work that He has begun in that soul. When Mother Angelica launched the shortwave radio station for EWTN in 1992, she gathered the employees together and she shared a scripture verse with us that outlined why she thought it was important to have this new international radio station that has now grown into the AM/FM affiliates that you are running. The scripture verse was from Ephesians 6, and it says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places." She explained to us that the battle was happening in the heavenlies. The battle again from taking place between God's angels and the evil one and his angels was happening in the air. And she said if she put this radio signal out and it was covering virtually the whole world, that even if no one was listening, the fact that the Word of God was slicing through the airwaves would have an impact on that battle that was taking place in the heavenlies. We know that we have many, many, many listeners who, in addition to this wonderful effect that Mother explained to us, the word that is going out from your radio stations and will be going out from your radio stations is having an effect on each of them as well. Thank you for answering the call. Thank you for stepping up to the plate, and know that many lives are being changed by the work that you are about. EWTN Catholic Radio is an essential tool in the new evangelization, and you, my friends, our Joshuas and our Calebs, are an essential part in its success.